There's a quiet reality about children who grow up unseen. They often turn into adults who find it hard to believe they're worthy of attention. When they walk into a room, they instinctively make themselves smaller. In relationships, they worry they're asking for too much. Even when they achieve something great, they don't celebrate. It's as if they're waiting to fade into the background. Believing invisibility is simply who they are. This isn't because they lack ability or value, but because their sense of self was shaped in silence. Psychologists refer to this as an internalized neglect schema. Over time, the brain learns to expect neglect, to anticipate rejection, to assume that having needs is a problem. A child who's ignored enough times eventually stops asking. They start to believe that desiring love, care, or understanding is somehow a mistake. Have you ever noticed a child standing in a crowded room, quietly tugging at their parent's sleeve, hoping for just a small glance and a moment of recognition? Maybe you've seen it at a playground, in a classroom, or even within your own family, the child who doesn't shout or demand attention, but instead slips into silence. On the surface, it might appear that nothing serious is happening. But inside that child's mind, something profound is taking place. For a child, being ignored isn't a simple inconvenience. It's a deep crack in the foundation of their sense of self. And here's the heartbreaking truth. Childhood neglect, whether deliberate or accidental, doesn't always resemble abuse. It doesn't always come with harsh words or visible cruelty. Sometimes it's just absence. The unspoken question left unanswered, the lack of eye contact, the forgotten birthday, or the parent who's too busy, too tired, too distracted to notice. The psychology of the overlooked child runs deep. It molds how they see themselves, how they perceive others, and how they form relationships later in life. We often believe that children are resilient, that they can bounce back from almost anything. And yes, children do adapt, but adaptation isn't the same as healing. When a child grows up without recognition, they adapt by becoming smaller, by silencing their needs, by convincing themselves they don't matter as much as others. And though this helps them survive their early years, it can quietly shadow their adult lives in ways they may never fully understand. From a psychological point of view, acknowledgement isn't just about feeling appreciated, it's essential for survival. Research in developmental psychology repeatedly shows that children need 3 core elements to thrive: safety, stimulation, and connection. If any of these are missing, their growth is affected. But connection, being seen, heard, and valued, is what most powerfully shapes their identity. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, explained that secure attachment, built when a caregiver consistently acknowledges and responds to a child's needs, forms the foundation of trust. That trust becomes the blueprint for all future relationships. But when a child's needs are met with silence or indifference, when a child faces silence or inconsistency, they don't just feel hurt in that moment. They absorb a dangerous belief. Maybe I'm not worthy of love. Maybe I don't matter. This isn't an exaggeration. Neuroscience shows that when a child's attempts to connect are repeatedly ignored, their brain reads it as danger. The body's stress system activates, flooding them with cortisol. Over time, this rewires their nervous system to expect rejection. Anxiety becomes their baseline. Their ability to regulate emotion weakens. Yet from the outside, they might seem like just a quiet child. When a child is openly mistreated, the harm is visible. But when a child is ignored, the damage hides beneath the surface. Quieter, subtler, yet equally real. A child might stop asking questions because they no longer expect answers. They may lose their spark of excitement because no one reacts. Slowly, they begin to fade. Not physically, but emotionally. Psychologists call this emotional neglect. Unlike physical neglect, which leaves visible scars, emotional neglect leaves marks hidden deep within. These wounds often remain unseen until adulthood, when that once ignored child tries to build closeness, chase purpose, or find love, only to collide with the silent pain they've carried all along. Many adults who grew up feeling unseen struggle with low self-worth. They hesitate to express themselves, convinced no one truly cares. Some fear rejection so much that they avoid relationships entirely. Others do the opposite. Overextend themselves for approval, bending over backward to please others, still trying to earn the validation they missed as children. Picture this: An 8-year-old runs home from school, thrilled to show their parent a drawing. But the parent is busy on the phone. The child tries again at dinner, but the moment passes. Eventually, they tuck the drawing away and stop trying. Now imagine this happening not once, but hundreds of times. The child learns that joy, pride, and excitement are best hidden, and years later, as an adult, that same person might struggle to feel proud of anything they achieve, quietly dismissing their own success. The ignored child becomes the adult who ignores themselves. Research supports this. A 2019 study in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry revealed that emotional neglect in childhood is closely linked to deep, lasting loneliness in adulthood, no matter the person's social situation. In simple terms, even adults surrounded by friends, family, or a loving partner may still feel an inner emptiness that never truly fades. Most parents who emotionally overlook their children don't do it out of cruelty. It often stems from overwhelming stress, financial struggles, mental health challenges, or simply not realizing how vital emotional validation is. A parent juggling multiple jobs might be too drained to connect, while one battling depression might miss their child's silent calls for attention. And today, endless digital distractions, phones, screens, notifications, pull focus away from family life. Yet good intentions don't erase emotional impact. For the child, absence feels the same no matter the reason. That's why understanding the psychology of the ignored child is so crucial, because awareness is the first step toward healing and breaking the cycle. Ignored. Children often develop coping patterns that may look like strengths at first. Some grow fiercely independent, learning to rely only on themselves. Others become relentless achievers, desperate to earn the acknowledgement they missed. Some turn into peacekeepers, avoiding conflict at all costs to maintain a fragile sense of connection. But beneath these traits often lies deep exhaustion. The independent child grows into an adult who struggles with trust. The achiever becomes a perfectionist, never feeling good enough. The peacekeeper turns into a people pleaser, afraid to say no. And perhaps the saddest response is from the child who simply stops trying, concluding, if no one cares, why should I? That child may carry apathy into adulthood, battling low motivation, fading ambition, and loss of hope. Most ignored children never openly share their pain, because how do you describe what it's like to feel invisible? There's no dramatic story, no single event, no scars, just quiet moments that should have mattered but didn't. That silence becomes another wall. Adults who grew up unseen often hesitate to seek help, fearing rejection all over again. Many therapy clients even downplay their pain, saying, "Nothing really bad happened to me." But the absence of something essential is a kind of trauma. It's like living in a house without air, surviving, but never breathing freely. And the long-term consequences are real. Research from the National Institute of Mental Health shows that adults who faced emotional neglect as children face higher risks of anxiety, depression, and struggles in forming close relationships. Similarly, a Harvard Center on the Developing Child study emphasizes that consistent acknowledgement during childhood strengthens the brain's pathways for resilience, while neglect weakens them. Simply put, acknowledgement isn't optional. It's essential for healthy development. This doesn't mean every ignored child is destined to struggle forever. Many grow into deeply compassionate, thoughtful adults precisely because they understand what it feels like to be invisible. Yet their path is often more challenging. They must spend years unlearning beliefs planted in them long before they could question them. So where does healing truly begin? Not with perfection and not by instantly becoming confident, but with awareness. With the gentle yet powerful act of telling yourself, what happened to me mattered. My needs were real. My pain was valid. For the child who grew up feeling unseen, the first step in healing is often giving themselves the acknowledgement they were once denied. And while that might sound abstract, it can be surprisingly simple. It can mean taking a moment to celebrate your own progress. It can mean saying your feelings out loud, even if it's only to yourself. It can mean daring to believe that your thoughts and emotions have value, because acknowledgement isn't something you outgrow. The need to be seen doesn't fade with time. It just goes underground. Healing is about bringing that need back into the light. Think about how this appears in friendships. An ignored child often becomes the quiet listener, always there for others but hesitant to open up about their own pain. They might seem selfless, but inside there's often a quiet ache. Why don't I matter as much? This isn't selfishness, it's a yearning for balance that was never given. In romantic relationships, the impact runs even deeper. Some adults who were ignored as children crave affection so strongly, they cling to anyone who shows care. Others pull away, keeping emotional distance because closeness feels unsafe. Both reactions stem from the same fear, the belief that love will vanish and their needs won't be met. And here lies the paradox. The ignored child often grows into one of the most empathetic adults you'll ever meet. They understand the sting of being unseen and develop a heightened sensitivity to others' emotions. Research in developmental psychology even shows that neglected children often, they learn to interpret expressions, tone, and even subtle changes in emotion, because their safety once depended on it. They had to sense when it was safe to speak and when silence was the only answer. This hyper-awareness can turn into a strength later in life. Yet it comes with a cost. They become so attuned to others that they forget to listen to themselves. There's another layer to this, one that's rarely discussed. When a child is consistently ignored, their sense of self can remain unclear. They were never mirrored back, meaning their emotions and thoughts weren't validated enough for them to feel real through the eyes of others. As adults, they might constantly seek approval, not out of vanity, but because they were never given the chance to see their reflection in someone's love. Identity is formed through connection. Without that reflection, the self becomes fragile. But here's where something extraordinary happens. The human mind carries a resilience that borders on poetic. Even when ignored as children, people hold onto a quiet hope. That's why many adults who were once unseen search for healing. They read about psychology, dive into self-awareness, seek therapy, or pour their feelings into journals. They refuse to live in the same silence they grew up with. They want to break it. That very desire is proof of inner strength and the possibility of recovery. Neuroscience tells us the brain isn't fixed. It adapts, grows, and rewires. So even if a child was once overlooked, they can create new emotional patterns as adults. Every time they speak and are heard, their brain records safety. Every time they set a boundary and it's respected, their nervous system learns trust. Each genuine connection becomes a small drop of water, slowly softening the stone of old wounds. Healing doesn't always appear dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as telling a friend, "I really need you to listen right now," or saying, "That hurt me," instead of burying the pain. Sometimes it's sitting quietly and whispering, "My feelings matter," even if no one ever told you they did. These moments are small revolutions, pushing back against years of silence. And the truth is, it's not easy. Those who were once ignored often grow into adults terrified of rejection. Speaking up can feel frightening. Setting boundaries can feel like betrayal. Yet every act of honesty becomes a step toward reclaiming the voice they were once denied. Asking for help can often feel like a weakness. But true courage lies in doing it anyway, in facing that fear, because that's what slowly begins to rebuild the self. It's important to remember this as well. Parents who ignore their children are not always heartless. Sometimes they too were once ignored. Sometimes they were overwhelmed, lost in their own battles, or simply unaware of the weight of their absence. This doesn't excuse the pain, but it reminds us that patterns of neglect often echo across generations. When an adult begins to heal from being unseen, they are not just mending their own heart, they are breaking a cycle that may have lasted decades. Think of it like this. Every ignored child who learns to truly listen to themselves becomes a parent, a friend, or a partner who listens more deeply. Every ignored child who learns to honor their own needs becomes someone who shows others that their needs matter too. Healing doesn't stay still. It ripples outward, and that leads to one of the most powerful truths. An ignored child often feels as if their existence left no mark. But in reality, their story holds incredible strength. Their journey through invisibility, and their fight to be seen, can inspire others in ways they might never realize. By sharing their truth, they remind the silent ones that they're not alone. By choosing to heal, they open the path for others to do the same. So if you were that child, if you ever sat in your room waiting for someone to notice you, if you ever felt your emotions were too heavy for anyone to carry, if you ever wondered whether you mattered, hear this now. You did. You do. You matter now. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about giving yourself the love you always deserved. It's learning to see yourself not through the lens of neglect, but through the eyes of compassion. It's understanding that being ignored shaped you, but it does not define you. The psychology of the ignored child is a story of pain, yes, but also one of extraordinary resilience. It's the story of how silence can create wounds, but how breaking that silence can bring wisdom. How invisibility can feel like a curse, yet fuel deep empathy, connection, and truth. In the end, the child who was once ignored often grows into the adult who refuses to ignore others. And in that act, imperfect, messy, brave, they discover something profound. They were never truly invisible. They were simply waiting to be seen.